Are we just doing the previous week's ones, like last week's comprehension and the weeks before?
No. So you can ask any questions you like today. But first thing I want to go through today is narrative structure.
Wait, can we ask like math questions?
Yeah, you can ask any questions you like.
Like
This
from
week?
for week 6.
Sorry?
Can we ask for week
Can we
6?
ask for
Melvin,
Yeah, you can ask. No, you can't ask week 6. Week 6 is only for next week.
Melvin,
The previous
One
week's
sec.
ones, like last week's comprehension and the weeks before?
Yeah, no. So you can ask
Including
you like today. But first thing I want to go through today. All right. So narrative structure. Perfect. So, all right. So yeah, you can ask any questions you like from this week and the previous weeks, but you can't ask the week 6 homework because we haven't gone through that in class and a lot of kids haven't done the homework for that yet. All right, so let's go through narrative structure. You can't hear me, Girik? Turn up your volume. Can you guys hear me? Rest of you? Okay. All right. Could I get Tanya? Tanya, can you tell me if you can hear me or not? Tanya, can you hear me?
yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So let's get started. So narrative structure, the reason it's so important is it's about 10 marks of when we mark your writing, we give 10 marks for your narrative structure. And if you if you don't have a good structure in your story, it's very hard to follow and it's very hard to get good marks as well. The other benefit of narrative structure, so there's two, I'll write it down. So benefit one, oops. Structure, story. And the second benefit that I really love narrative structure for is that it helps you plan your story, right? It helps you plan your story. Now, most of you last week, when I remember asking you, well, it was yesterday, most of you said that in your English writing, usually you start writing a story and you try to figure out the ending as you write the story. Now, this is not the best way to go about it because, as most of you might have noticed, halfway through your story, your teacher tells you that you have 5 minutes left, and then you rush to finish the story, right? So it's not the most optimal. So thank you. All right. So it's not the most optimal way to go about writing your story. So you should know the ending by planning it out. So you know the beginning, middle, and the end of your story, so that when you start writing, you know exactly how it's going to end, and therefore you won't have to rush the ending. So I'm gonna show you guys how the narrative structure sort of looks like. I know most of you have gone through it in class. I'll just go through it again. Perfect. So at the beginning, we have exposition. Exposition. Maybe put the size a bit. Exposition. Then we have our problem. Then after that, we have writing action. At the top, we have, let me see another color. Say blue, Climax. And then we have falling action. Falling action. And then at the end, we have, what's another color we can use? White. We have resolution. Resolution. Perfect. So there's these different elements, right? Now, This is how I like to see it. There's many different versions to the narrative structure, but this is my favorite version. Okay. And even the definitions I'll give you today, there's many different definitions out there, but it's all, everyone has their own interpretation to it. This is how I like to see it. If there's a different way that you like to follow, that's up to you. But when I mark it and when Jenny, Manny, or Henry marks it, this is the sort of things we look for. Okay. And the reason we've said it this way is to make sure like this is the most useful structure that's relevant to the gauge test. For the other tests, it might be a bit different, but this is the best one for the gauge test. That's why we've chosen this. Now, one thing I'm trying to do right now, right, is to make sure that the camera is pinned to my face so that when we record it, it doesn't move around to other people. Let me see if I can pin. Perfect.
Melvin,
Yep,
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just doing so I can just see my audio is working.
Okay. For the rest of you guys, please don't do that during class. Okay.
Marvin,
Yes.
if like say someone else wrote like a persuasive text, would you be biased and leaning towards saying that it would have been better if it was a narrative structure instead?
Not at all. We'll be going through persuasive structure next week. I think today, Jenny, like yesterday, Jenny went through persuasive structure with some of her students. But for most of us, we planned to go through persuasive structure next week. I just wanted to go through this today because the Sunday class is essentially for me to make sure that everyone's caught up to speed. And next week we'll go through like not next week, the week after we'll go through persuasive structure. That's fine. And at the end of the term
Because-
or somewhere later, I'll talk about the benefits and the disadvantages of doing each of the different types and tell you which one's the best for for you. Yeah.
Melvin.
What's your question, Alphonse? I think you had something else to say.
Yeah, because like some other people are like better at persuasive text than narrative, while some people are better in poetry and stuff like that.
100%.
All depends on like your personal choice and your capability in order to do a good text.
100%. Yeah. So for example, personally for me, I prefer persuasive writing when I was in year 12. But other students might prefer story writing. It's really up to you.
Excuse
Okay.
me, Melvin.
Yeah.
In the amount of time given in the GATE exam, like what would you recommend the type of story or whatever?
Oh, okay. So this is a good question. I was hoping to go through this next week, but I'll quickly answer it. Personally, I would say the easiest type of writing to get most marks in is persuasive. The reasoning is this. Persuasive is very logical. It's step by step, right? And you're usually marked on your logic and the strength of your arguments because they're looking for creativity, right? And the way you can be creative in your argument is by having non-conventional arguments for your, essay. So to give you an example, let's just say you want to argue about climate change. That's something a lot of like young people are really interested in. Most kids will say, oh, climate change, it causes, polar bears to die off and like turtles will choke on straws and like we gotta get hydro flasks to save the turtles and stuff like that, right? But if a non-conventional argument that's still pretty strong is you could say that climate change is very real and very important, but it's also important to understand the impacts of certain changes. For example, most people think that if everyone switches to solar energy, we're going to have no more mining for oil and gas. But that's not true. We still need oil and gas for so many other things, right? Actually, I'm talking about electric cars. Most people think if you switch to electric cars, like such as Tesla, you won't have to use petrol and then produce global warming. But how is electricity generated, right? Electricity is generated usually through oil, coal, oil, gas. I don't know, depending on the country you live in. Some countries have nuclear energy. Some countries have hydro energy. But mostly in countries like, I think, a lot of countries, coal is, I think, the cheapest. It's not the cleanest, but most people, I think, use oil and gas to generate electricity, like power plants, right? So essentially, you can argue that if you were to switch from petrol cars to electric cars, you're not really reducing global warming. You're just using the oil in a different way. You're not burning it in your car. You're just burning it in a factory and therefore then sending it to your car, right?
But
So,
also, Melvin,
yeah,
another
yeah.
question.
Wait, let me
what
answer this one first. Let me answer this one first. So, if you have unconventional arguments like that, right, and then you talk about the advantages and disadvantages of certain things that most people don't think about, then you're more likely to get better marks, right? So the issue with that is you have to have a breadth of knowledge, right? You have to have a very broad set of knowledge or of general knowledge, because you have to be able to write a persuasive writing based on the different topics you get. Narrative writing is the easiest for most students because everyone here knows about their own stories. The reason it's hard to score on is because it really depends on how well you can tell a story. Do you guys understand? All right, what's the next question, Amit? Last question, but and then I'll go through the structure and then I'll answer any of the questions you have.
My topic was a fish jumping out of a bucket with
Yeah.
some risks are worth it. What would you have wrote about?
For that, if it was persuasive. Amit?
Narrative.
Narrative. Oh, perfect. Okay, if it was okay, how about that? Let's use that topic that you had for what I'm going to do later. So let me just quickly go through narrative structure and then we'll do that topic. So exposition, you do three things. So you introduce your character, your character's desire. I can't spell. I don't know who made me an English tutor, and I can't even spell. That's a joke, by the way.
Your jokes are
Melvin.
too good, Melvin. Your jokes are the best.
Oh, so funny.
Okay, all right.
Very
Thank
funny.
That-
Big
Melvin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Melvin.
Yes, yes.
I have one question, just one last one. After the narrative structure, if we
Yeah.
don't have any questions, can we just leave?
100%.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright. You're welcome. So the next thing is problem, right? So the problem in your story is anything that comes in between the character, and the desire. So in the earlier section, we talk about what the character wants. So the problem is anything that comes in between the character and the character's desire from what they want. Then we have a rising action. Rising.
Melvin,
Yeah.
what do you mean by anything that becomes between the character and the desire?
Okay, I'll go step by step then. So, in your exposition, when you introduce a character, right? Since you have 25 minutes, don't have too many characters. Have 1, 2, 3, or 4 characters. Well, have a maximum of 3 characters, right? Otherwise, it's just too much. Introduce a character, who the character is, what they look like to an extent, what the personality is like, etc., etc. Introduce a setting, right? And introduce a character desire. So let's just say I'm going to use Naman's topic to give you an example of how this would work. The Naman's topic was a fish jumping out of a tiny little bowl into the ocean, correct, Naman?
Yeah, and there was a quote with some risks are worth it.
Perfect. So what I would think about it is, have you guys heard of the idiom, be a big fish in a small pond, or a small fish in a big pond?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're in primary school and you're year 6, you're a big fish in a small pond, and then when you go to high school, you're like a small fish in a big pond.
Perfect. Yeah. One second. Let me just close my door. My parents are really loud. One second.
I can't hear them.
Oh, I can hear them.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Them.
I can hear them. They're so loud. They're just yelling all the time.
Melvin.
I couldn't even hear them.
I can hear them really loud.
Melvin.
Yes.
Do you like my background?
Oh.
No, it's so bad.
But not as bad as you.
Okay,
Don't be toxic.
guys, come on. Alfie.
Melvin,
Yeah.
what's an idiom?
Okay, so an idiom is just an expression. So
Okay.
things like raining cats and dogs and stuff like that.
Okay,
So
thanks.
yeah, when you're in primary school, you're a big fish in a small pond, right? You're the coolest kid there. I'll give you an example in a lot of your lives, right? A lot of you guys at your schools, you guys are the smartest kids in your school. But when you come to gate and you come to the tuition classes, right? You realize that you guys are not like doing that well anymore, right? In school, you might be easily getting A's and stuff, but then you come do something for questions and you're like, oh my gosh, why am I getting so many questions wrong? And that's basically it. And the thing is, so based on that story, well, the topic, what I'll look at it is going from a place of comfort, which is inside a protected fishbowl, to an ocean where I could be eaten up, right? So think about, for example, I'm studying business, part of my degree, right? So business is a great example, right? A lot of businesses, they like to stay, if they stay in a comfortable zone, right? They end up dying. And if they compete hard, they will succeed. A great example is Nokia. Do you guys remember Nokia phones?
Yes.
Yeah. So Nokia used to be the biggest phone back in the day, right? Like all the top, like technology, it was like one of the biggest technology companies. Same as Yahoo. It was so big. But they were too lazy to change. They did not change as fast as they should have. And because of that, they died. Like who uses Bing anymore from Yahoo, right? Nobody uses Bing. Nobody uses Internet Explorer. Nobody uses Nokia phones anymore. So,
Core is pretty useful.
sorry?
Core is useful.
Core.
Because sometimes people use like actual website information and put it on it.
Okay. Anyways, so maybe I'll write a story about a boy who, let's just say
I think I know.
he starts a small little candy shop by selling line of chocolates at school. And then after that, after he graduated, he started set up a small candy store. And then he was too scared. He didn't know if he should take a loan to build a candy factory or whether he should just stay and just like, look after a small candy store and make, a decent amount of money. So the introduction, let's say the character's name is Naman, as he has the question. Naman always wanted to run a candy store. That's the character's desire. The name is the character is Naman. And the setting is, he is, I don't know, 15 years old, and he's in Perth selling chocolates out of his locker in his high school at Rossmoyne. The problem, so many other people start selling the candy, and he doesn't know if he wants to compete with them, right? He doesn't know if he should set up an actual store to sell it. Rising action. So so he wants to sell candy stores, but like start up a candy store to sell more candy. But there's a competitor, so that's a problem. It's coming in between the character and the character's desire. Rising action is when the problem intensifies or gets worse. So, by the way, excuse my handwriting, it's really bad, but hopefully you guys can read it. When the problem intensifies or gets worse. So, Naman decides to eventually start up his candy store. He calls it Naman's Candies, and he sets up a little shop in, I don't know, Villiton, right? And eventually, right next to him, starts another candy store, and they're called Alphonse's Candy. And it's really intense competition between them, right? And for example, Alphonse would start up a new like marketing campaign where it'd be like buy 2 candies and get 1 free, and then Naman would lose customers, and then Naman would have to invent a new chocolate that doesn't melt, and then the problem gets worse and worse and worse.
Alfonso's black market.
Alphonse is a black market of expired chocolates.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then the climax. The turning point for the.
Are you writing climax or what? I can't.
Are you trying to make it pretty or is this just brushwork?
No, this is just rushed work. But my handwriting in general is not that great. My handwriting is really
Melvin,
yeah. I think
for climax,
Mhm.
can you also say the turning point or the peak of the problem?
Sure, you can say that. Or the problem at its worst, right? So in the climax in our story, we would have Naman's got a decision to make, right? Naman's business advisor, Miss Navazish, comes to him and says, "Hey, Naman, we have this amazing factory that we're looking at. If you, take a loan for for $1 million and buy this factory, you'll be able to sell way more candy than everyone else. But if you're not able to sell, $1 million worth of candy every month, then you'll go bankrupt and you lose your house. But if you do succeed, you'll be a billionaire." Naman's faced with a decision, right? This is the climax, it's a turning point. So in our story, Naman's sitting in his office really stressed out. And he watches this little fish, right? In this fishing bowl. And he watches as the fish every day would swim around and then try to jump out of the fishing bowl, but it would hit the top of the fish tank and then fall back in. And he realized that despite getting hit in the head all the time, this little fish kept on trying to jump out. And that's when he realizes that just like this fish trying to have the courage to jump out of this tank, he should have the courage to jump out of his little shop and start up his own factory, right? And he says to himself, maybe some risks are worth it. So that way, I've talked about the image and I've talked about the quote. And then he agrees to the factory. And the falling action. Falling action. Okay, I'll make it tidy if you want to.
Wait,
Okay.
Melvin, you know
Yeah.
your text about the key?
Yeah.
What type of text was that you wrote? It wasn't really a narrative.
Yeah, it was it was just a reflective piece. It was just me reflecting on the topic.
So it's kind of like a review.
Not a review, it's just like my opinion on things, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of like let me think about that question and I'll get back to you next week on that.
Okay.
Following action. So usually the following action, right? It's the inter actually it's usually minor. So in between the climax and the resolution, like the lasting impact, there's a bit of period where it explains what happens, right? So in our story, Naman's factory is actually a huge hit. He's able to sell candy for so much cheaper, and he completely wipes out all his competition, right? Naman's candy ends up buying all the major chocolate factories such as Kit Kat, Willy Wonka's, Cadbury, Nestle, etc., right? And he
Melvin,
yeah.
does that say any minor plot or does it say any minor?
I gotta change that. Thank you. Gotta change that. Thank you. All minor plot threads are solved. Sorry, all minor plot threads are solved. Yeah. So it's in the story. His factory is a success, and yeah, the resolution finally is.
Alfonso's black market gets caught by the police.
Oh, that will be in the falling action. Alfonso's black market being caught, and then he's like taken to jail is in the falling action. Sorry, Alphonse.
Why am I getting street?
Huh? That's not Alphonse who said that.
No, I did not say that.
Yeah, who was that? Right. So the resolution is the lasting impact of the story, right? So what happens? So in our story, the lasting impact is Naman eventually becomes a billionaire and he lives happily ever after, I guess. Right? Do you guys understand? So before you have any more questions, let me just quickly go through why the narrative structure helps you plan really well. Right. When you get your topic, so for example, when Naman gave me that topic of the fish in the fishbowl, right? I use the narrative structure as one to plan out how I'm going to write the story, and two, it helps as a checklist to make sure I have each of the different elements. So when I get a topic, the first thing you should do, I mean, well, all of you guys should do this, is look, ask yourself, look at the
Melvin.
creative options, right? Look at the 3 things you need to have in your creative writing.
Melvin.
Please, 1 second. I'm answering a question. You can ask me after, okay? The first thing is the story about the literal image. So don't write a story about an actual fish jumping out of a bowl. In our story, is a story about a fish jumping out of a bowl. No, it's about Naman, the businessman, who's trying to grow his candy store, right? And although it's not about the fish in the bowl, we still talk about a fish jumping out of the bowl, right? The fish tank in his office serves as inspiration for Naman to start his factory, right? So we do talk about the image, but the story is not about the literal image. The second thing is it realistic? Yes, right? There's so many businessmen, like business stories or whatever, that are very similar to this. There's no magical stuff happening in the story, right? It's all realistic things that are happening, right? And lastly, does it have a message? Yes, the message is some risks are worth it, and sometimes you succeed. Now that I have all those things checked off, I'll look at my narrative structure. Exposition. Do I have my character? Yes, I have my character. His name is Naman. Yep, check. Do I have a character desire? Yes, he wants to start his own. What was it called again? A chocolate company, chocolate factory. Done. What's the setting? Yep, he's in Perth in his high school at the beginning, and then it's later changed on. Do we have a problem? Anything that comes in between the character and the character's desire? Yes, we have the Alphonse's Candy, who's competing against him with the black market or something like that. I don't even get it. How do you have a black market for chocolate? Does he like get like old expired chocolate and sell it for cheap or something?
I sell the chocolate that grandpas and grannies have.
What? All right.
Expired version.
Okay. Rising action. The problem gets worse, right? Yeah, it does get worse. As soon as Naman starts a store, Alphonse starts a store next to him and has promotions that compete against him. Climax. Yep, we have a climax. Naman's lawyer or business lady, Miss Navazish, comes in to tell him that he should invest in a factory. Falling action. Yes, we have falling action. It's when Alphonse's black market gets busted and the factory is actually a success. And lastly, resolution, the last thing in the story. Yep, we have that as well with Naman becoming a billionaire. So using the narrative structure as a checklist, before I start writing my story, I know exactly what I will write about. And therefore, I don't have to rush the ending. Do you guys understand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Melvin,
Yes.
I understand.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Melvin. Yes.
What's your question?
Yes.
What if you like you plan out your story, but at the end you don't have enough time, so you
And that's a perfect thing, Manav, right? If you have this planning sort of method, right? The best thing is even if you have to rush at the end, your rush will be good because you know exactly what you have to write out. Do you get me? Because usually what you guys will have to do is you will rush it, but then you're still trying to figure out the ending, right? You don't know exactly where to go next. But if you do this method, you will know exactly what to write next rather than just guessing it and just trial and error sort of thing. Do you understand?
yes.
Yeah.
What if you plan out your story, but at the end you don't have enough time, so you don't have enough time, so you have to rush at the end, and you plan out your story, but at the end you don't have enough time, so you
Perfect.
Hey, Melvin,
Yes.
don't you
Fine.
need a moral?
Huh?
Don't you need a moral or anything like that?
The
You do?
moral was the guy taking risks to get his business like growing.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. All right. So now that I'm finished my narrative structure, I'll answer any questions that you guys have. So send it in the chat. Send it in the chat.
Wait, Melvin,
Mhm.
is it the questions for homework or for this?
Anything. Either. Okay, so the first question I think I can see in the chat is Tanya's computer. Okay, so Tanya's computer has a few questions. So, okay, who was I am host? Okay, so I am host is asking, stop sending the links to WhatsApp and just put it on the website. Yep, I will do that. I'll still send it to the WhatsApp, but you can see it on the website. The topic for this week's writing is ocean. If your tutor has given you a different topic, that's fine. I just go with the topic that your tutor has given you. Is the code for the meeting always the same? Yes, it's always the same. Also, when you change the time, how will we know? Will you send a text to the loyalty tutoring thing on WhatsApp? And what if we can't make it in the time and can't come? What do we do? I don't know what you'll do for that scenario, but yes, if we do make a change to the timing, we will let all the parents know. You have low battery. Okay, how do you screenshot? Week 6 question.
Melvin,
Understand. We won't go through week 6 today, Mana. We'll go through that next week.
Melvin,
Yep.
if you don't have any questions, can you leave?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Psych.
All right. Question number 3 for coral bleaching. Okay. Now, is there any questions you have, you can send it through the chat. I think you had a few questions for generability, right?
Yeah, I have a few questions for generability of last week.
Yep, send it through. Okay, question 3 for coral bleaching. Question 3. Question 3. What are other ways to describe the crocheted blanket of gases? Oh, in class, I think I changed my answer, but then I double checked and yeah, it makes sense. So question 3 says, what is a crocheted blanket of gases? One second, let me just quickly end the live.